In 2025, 4 Nordic countries quietly launched one of the most consequential defense initiatives in Europe, an alliance not centered on ships or jets, but on bullets. On the 6th of March, Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark signed a technical arrangement to create a shared munitions procurement and certification system, effectively building the continent's first joint ammunition supply chain. The Nordic Ammo Alliance may sound bureaucratic, but it represents a radical rethinking of European defense logistics. The realization that modern wars are won not only by technology or tactics, but by the industrial capacity to sustain them. Europe's ammunition crisis has been brewing for years. After the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, the European Union promised to deliver 2 million artillery shells annually by the end of 2025. By mid-year, less than half that target, around 900,000 rounds, had been produced. The reason was not just political hesitation, but structural weakness. The continent's munitions industry had been fragmented for decades, with separate standards, overlapping regulations, and fragile chemical supply chains dependent on imported nitrocellulose. Each country had its own stockpile, its own certification system, and its own procurement bureaucracy. In an era of high-intensity warfare, that model simply could not scale. The Nordic states saw the problem early. Unlike larger European powers, they operate under the concept of total defense, a whole society framework linking the military, industry, and civilian sectors. When the ammunition shortage began to threaten collective readiness, Helsinki, Stockholm, Oslo, and Copenhagen agreed that waiting for Brussels to coordinate was no longer an option. Their solution was pragmatic: merge procurement at the regional level, standardize ammunition certification, and distribute production tasks according to each country's industrial strengths. Under the new system, Finland's Patria handles case manufacturing and final assembly, leveraging its strong production base in Hämeenlinna. Norway's Nammo provides propellants and projectile manufacturing, including the high-demand 155mm and 120mm calibers. Sweden's Saab Bofors supplies guidance components, safety mechanisms, and explosives expertise. Denmark, which has recently reopened its historic Elling plant, acts as the regional certification hub to ensure compatibility with NATO standards. The result is a vertically integrated chain stretching from the Baltic to the North Sea, capable of supplying every stage of ammunition production from raw chemicals to finished rounds. This network will not merely produce shells, it will create interoperability between the 4 militaries at an unprecedented level. Ammunition certified in Denmark can be fired by Finnish or Norwegian artillery without additional testing. Shared storage depots, known as the Joint Nordic Stockpile, will allow one country's surplus to reinforce another's in wartime. Early projections suggest that this system could cut overall logistics costs by 20 to 25%, while doubling surge capacity in a crisis. In strategic terms, it transforms the Nordic region from a consumer of defense goods into a reliable industrial base for NATO's northern flank. Beyond logistics, the alliance carries deep industrial and political meaning. Europe's defense rearmament has mostly focused on acquiring modern platforms, yet few initiatives address the underlying industrial infrastructure. The Nordic states are filling that gap. Nammo's new facility at Raufoss will increase propellant output by 30%. Patria has announced the modernization of its shell assembly lines, while Saab is expanding Bofors' capacity to produce modular fuse and components for precision ammunition. Denmark's Elling facility, dormant for 4 decades, will resume production in 2027, symbolically closing a circle that began when Europe dismantled its Cold War arsenals. These developments collectively mark the rebirth of a northern defense industry, small in scale but resilient in structure. The geopolitical context gives this effort additional weight. The European Defence Ammunition Act, EDA, aims to coordinate continental production through large-scale EU funding, but its implementation has been slow and politically entangled. The Nordic approach, by contrast, is decentralized and rapid. It does not wait for Brussels or Washington. The United States supports the initiative quietly, seeing it as complementary to NATO's support and procurement agency, while some European capitals fear that it might set a precedent for regional autonomy. Russia, watching closely, views the project as a direct reinforcement of NATO's High North Command. Chinese trade analysts have already noted an uptick in nitrocellulose exports to Hungary, suggesting that Beijing is maneuvering to compete for influence over Europe's munitions supply chain. For the Nordic countries, this alliance is not just about filling warehouses. It is about ensuring that no single supplier or political dispute can cripple their defense posture. In the event of a prolonged conflict, whether a Baltic crisis or a confrontation in the Arctic, the ability to maintain steady ammunition output for 60 days or more could determine survival. In practice, the Nordic Ammo Alliance gives these countries an industrial buffer that even larger European powers currently lack. It is a quiet but decisive step towards strategic autonomy within the broader NATO framework. The economic rationale is equally compelling. By coordinating procurement, the four states can achieve economies of scale in raw materials, standardize contracts with chemical suppliers, and reduce transportation costs across the long Nordic distances. Shared testing and certification eliminate redundancy, freeing budget space for advanced research into insensitive munitions and environmental safety. Analysts estimate that by pooling their purchasing power, the Nordics could save tens of millions of euros annually, enough to fund new infrastructure and workforce training. More importantly, the cooperation model creates a template that smaller European nations, from the Baltics to the Balkans, could replicate. Politically, the alliance reinforces the Nordic identity as Europe's pragmatic problem solvers. While the EU debates and NATO strategizes, the northern states build. Their history of trust and shared governance allows technical agreements to become operational quickly. This functional integration echoes the post-war spirit that founded the European coal and steel community, but applied to defense logistics. Instead of coal and iron, the Nordics are uniting over powder and steel casings, resources equally vital to the continent's security. The symbolism is powerful: integration through necessity, not ideology. Looking forward to 2030, projections indicate that the Nordic region could produce up to 1/4 of all NATO ammunition manufactured in Europe. That would make it the continent's most concentrated and reliable supply hub north of the Baltic. As climate change opens new maritime routes and military interest in the Arctic grows, the Northern Arsenal could become a critical backbone of Europe's deterrence posture. The geography supports it: remote, politically stable, with access to both the Atlantic and the Baltic logistics corridors. For once, the region's isolation becomes a strategic asset. Yet challenges remain. Sustaining production requires a consistent flow of raw materials and long-term government contracts, not just one-off crisis orders. Environmental regulations and labor costs in the Nordic countries are among the strictest in the world. Balancing those constraints with wartime production demands will test the alliance's efficiency. There is also the question of political will, whether future governments will maintain the same cooperative momentum once immediate security pressures ease. But even if progress slows, the foundation has been laid. The deeper meaning of the Nordic Ammo Alliance lies in its philosophy. It embodies a shift from consumption to resilience, from dependence to autonomy. Europe's past 2 years have demonstrated that strategic stockpiles matter as much as alliances, and that deterrence without industrial capacity is an illusion. By constructing a shared munitions ecosystem, the Nordics are proving that small states can act collectively with the impact of a great power. As 2030 approaches, analysts increasingly refer to the region as Europe's Arctic arsenal. It may not capture headlines like stealth fighters or missile systems, but in the next war, it will decide who keeps firing when everyone else runs dry. Europe's next shield may not be a wall of tanks or ships. It will be an industrial wall built in the north, cold, steady, and enduring. And that wall is already under construction.